Here we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Cycle 2, our workshop here. Glad to have you guys, and we're going to have a good time here. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you look in the chat box there, I have the presentation there as the first link. If you go ahead and click there, I am going to share. Do you guys see that there?
I didn't get the link yet. Do you have it, Nathan?
No, not yet.
Oh, it's not for you guys. Okay, let me do it again. There's nothing in the box there for you? That's weird. It shows mine for me. Okay, let me put it in there again. Perfect. Thank you for letting me know. All right. Do you see one now? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to put another link that's for the role for today, role sheet for today. Second link. So that one, as you open it up, is it showing you a presentation? Okay, perfect. Okay, let me get the role sheet as well. Get that going. All right. Awesome. Let me know if that second link, if that appears there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll let Dr. O know that I do have some of you guys here now. Okay, got 2 people. Okay, so I'll let her know that we did actually get people in. All right, awesome. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Let's go to over here, share sound, optimize. Okay, go to the slide. All right. Okay, cool. All right, let me make it where I can see you guys. Okay, enable show panel. All right, let's go to our workshop here, number 2. All right, you guys able to see a slide right here where it says CalAPA Cycle Workshop 2? Awesome, awesome. All right, let's get it going here. All right, so our goal today is to, first, I don't want to overwhelm you, okay? It's just, I'm kind of giving you like a reference guide, and I try to make it in such a way where you can go back and look at these materials at a slower pace and say, okay, I get it. So I put so much information in there where it's kind of like resources to you, where you can always go back and check and say, okay, so what is this? And so that's a good thing. It's not like, sometimes people, they do the PowerPoints and there's some where you just put a couple words in there and it's all about whatever the professor says. You just kind of got to remember it. But I put this as informational for you. Okay. Awesome. Once again, I'm glad you guys are here and it's smart. Going into administration, into leadership, the ones that get there early, that show up and things like this, even when it's hard, when we're all busy, there's something about that, just being in the right place where it is true about the early bird gets the worm. So you guys coming early and trying to learn before everybody else and before you take the class and before all of that is like giving you a strong advantage. So right now it's like you guys are taking the AP courses, okay? All right, so what I like to start off with first is just kind of give you a recap of like where we're at. So CalAPA, right? All candidates for administrative services credential must now complete the California Administrative Performance Assessment, right? And that's where CalAPA means, right? So you have the 3 cycles, right? So you got the leadership cycle 1, that's where you're analyzing the data, and you guys are working on some assignment right now where you have a due date within the next week, right? So a lot of people are probably working on that. And that's where you're about school improvement, inform, you're doing a lot of quantitative data there, and you're learning how to use that data, right? So you got leadership cycle 2, and that's where I come in. And so I'm a CalAPA scorer also. So I was trained for that. So that's the part that I usually focus on. So facilitating communities of practice, that's what we're going to mainly focus on. That's all we're going to focus on mainly is going to be that part, but I want you to see the bigger picture. And then after that is a leadership cycle for supporting teacher growth. And there's a lot of similarities, of course, between cycle 2 and 3. All right, so one of the things I like to start off with to show the big picture, when it comes to all of this with CalAPA, they're trying to get a picture of what your leadership looks like, right? So if you're going to be an administrator and some leader, and of course, we're not totally tenured, but you're going to be like in charge of people or working or being responsible to be over people, other adults. They want to try to get into your mind, see where your emotions are, where your head is, where your heart is, and what type of leadership you're going to bring to the table. So just like within our content standards that we teach, we're able to measure, different levels of development or skill sets through professional standards. They want to see that language being used when you describe your leadership or talk about what your leadership looks like. So that's where you get the California professional standards for education leaders. So the work that you're going to do with community, with your community work and everything is all going to be explained in terms of standards so that they can feel like, okay, the skill sets that we're measuring, you're able to show us what type of leader you are. So you want to use their terminology. Does that make sense? So I want to start off first with that base because you do have to like talk the language. Sometimes you can get like so many details and sound all emotional and feelings and stuff, but they're like, well, what's the standard, right? So it is one of those like formulas is what they're looking for. So I put the reference there. So like if you click on this later, when you have time, right, it's going to show you the whole capsule for all the different standards that you're focusing on. So all of your writings, you're going to be referencing these standards, almost like as if it was like a holy book or something, right? You're going to reference what you're talking about, what your skill set is that you're promoting and that you're displaying in your leadership. Yep, this is about shared leadership, just like talked about in standard number 1 of the capsule. And that matches with CAPE 1A. We were talking about developing student-centered vision. So we came up with this, and then you describe what you guys came up with and how it promotes cultural proficiency and how you use those systems. So you look at all of this to give you tips and say what type of language to use and how to explain what you're doing. So throughout all of your writings and everything that you do, you want to match it to these standards. And that's going to give you that higher level score in order to do well on your CalAPA writing. Does that make sense? A lot of times you have your natural sense from your practice and you can talk good, but if you don't bring in these standards, they're going to say, well, do they really know that this is actually a part of the standard? Does that make sense? So make sure you reference that. Okay. And you know how like, since you're in a master's program, sometimes we can get deep and you start talking about your area or your thesis or your topic, and it sounds philosophical, it sounds good, it sounds poetic. They're not totally looking for that. I mean, it's good to sound good and you're a good writer, but make sure you give like those references. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but still it's okay. Don't stop writing good, but just make sure that it is kind of rubric based. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So with that being stated, I just want to kind of start off with that. So the same thing for all the different areas. So you hear words like CAPE, capsule, all of those things, like you want to reference all those standards and how they work together, implementing vision, so forth. Now, this is pretty cool. So on the CalAPA website, of course, for your cycle, they came up with a map showing you which cycle produces pretty much which standard is being used the most. It's kind of like a cheat guide, right? So I thought I would give you that as a reference to look at later. So go and look at that. That's kind of like a cheat sheet to show you on the different aspects of what you're doing, which cycle supports which CAPE. Does that make sense? So when you're referencing, you want to make sure that you're going back to that. This is like the key. It's like almost like if you're at Subway and they're teaching you how to make the sub sandwich or whatever, this is like going to like the recipe.
Yeah. So when we do reference this in our write-ups, how would we reference, like we're referencing CAPE 1 development? Yep. How would we reference that? Would we use just the vocabulary that's in the standard, or would we specifically say like CAPE 1, evidenced by CAPE 1?
Yep. You can say CAPE 1 and then development of implementation of shared vision, just like mentioned in that. And then if you want to get more specific and say like specifically CAPE 1A, developing student-centered vision, and you can do that as well. But the more the better. Don't just say CAPE 1. Right. At least put like the name behind it, and then go ahead and describe what you're talking about and how that matches. And if you get more detailed and you talk about which area of CAPE 1, so it's not as broad, that's even better.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So in that case, like the more details you give, it's just going to increase your score and it helps you to be more focused as well.
I have a
Good
quick
question.
question.
Go
So,
ahead, Ken.
so when we do our analysis or like our write-ups for CalAPA, this is really helpful, makes a lot of sense. Now, do we have to be explicit like this when we're recording our community of practice, or is that too grand?
No, this is more like on your reflection part, or when
Okay.
you're describing to your participants, to your community of practice, and you're letting them know where you're coming from. Kind of similar to when you're teaching and you let the students know that like, we're going to be learning about this standard and this is where we're going with this leadership, you know? So yeah, that's more like your reflection.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. So I just wanted to start off kind of with that, where make sure that you implement and put those qualities in there, because regardless of whatever your topic is, which is great, just like as if you were doing a thesis, they really want to see how you're applying the standards to what you're displaying and what you're showing, you know? Okay. All right. So similarly, throughout your write-up, too, there's times when you're going to be, and a lot of this is going to be for cycle 3, especially when you start getting into doing observations of teachers and having like pre and post conferences where you're going to talk more about the California standards for the teaching profession. But there may be some times even within cycle 2 where you may reference some of that, some leadership that you're showing or that teacher is showing through your leadership of what you're working on them with. So I just put all of those there as different components of references that'll give you like a solid foundation to show like, okay, I'm not just a leader that's just speaking, you know, with common sense, but I have framework and standards behind my leadership. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and there's a goal. Does that make sense? So if you can articulate that, I feel like that gives you some security, because you know, sometimes you've ever been in a class, which luckily you guys will have me pretty soon and you'll find out I'm not like that. But sometimes you can get a professor or someone that they're just kind of out there, they're deep and they're smart, but like, you don't know what their like expectations are. And it seems like one day they can like want you to do this and the next day something else, and you can't figure them out. So it's hard to know if you could like what type of grade or what they're, you know what I'm talking about? And then there's some where they spell it out pretty much black and white, like this is what it is, what it takes to get an A. This is what, you know what I mean? So I feel like by having these standards and knowing like some of the recipe, it's like, no, I know what's expected. It's not like a guess or just somebody's emotion or their objective. You know what I mean? It's really subjective. I feel like they tell us like, all right, this is where it's at. So in this time, I feel like it's safe. Like it gives me a little more security to know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we're going to jump into like some more specifics and what we also try to do, so that once again, it's not just like, if you missed something deep that I said, then you're just lost. No, I'm taking this directly from their own materials, what we teach you. So there's no overlap. You say, oh, well, what were they saying? This is different than what you're saying. We just take the materials directly from CalAPA and let's just help you interpret it and apply it. Does that make sense? This is not the time to try to get deep. You know what I mean? Like not with your own stuff. We want to just understand what they're requiring for you. So then you're just going to be adding to the recipe and giving more to increase your score, but you have all the basics and then you know what it takes to get that next level of 4 or 5. Does that make sense? Awesome. Oh, so anytime you see these, I put the guide there. So if you click on this, it has the whole CalAPA performance assessment guide for cycle 2. So that'll be your reference. You can go on there and it has everything there. Okay. All right. So overview for cycle 2 for leadership, right? Facilitating communities of practice. So basically our goal is they're trying to see at the basics of how do you lead others? Now this is big. You know, if you get an artist and they're like, okay, how do you draw this picture of this bird? Or how would you, they're going to show their skill sets of, how do you make light reflect on the paint or blah, blah, blah. So for us is how do you lead people? So it's, you're going to have to show your leadership in facilitating conversation and collaboration and coming to a consensus and, getting people to want to follow you basically, right? And to go after a goal together, to go after, a problem, an issue, and how do you like talk about it and lead others to wanting to follow you and shared leadership and all this type of stuff. So they're trying to get an ideal through your leadership, what you write, what you do, how you respond, the good, the bad, the everything, right? And figure out, okay, what type of leader is this? Does that make sense? So facilitate collaborative professional learning within a community of practice for the purpose of improving teaching and student learning. I know that sounds like that's simple, right? We all just want to improve learning. We want to improve teaching. In the midst of all that too, though, you're going to have conflict, right? You're going to have people that want to come and take over. You're going to have people who don't like you. You're an administrator, right? You're on the dark side, right? There's different unions. And, even though you know all those things, how do you get people to work together and to build trust? And how do you keep your emotions right and have all, the people wanting to work together and listen to each other and feel trust? And you know what I mean? But your ultimate goal is, where our purpose is to improve teaching and learning. So how do you show that, right? Identify the work and work with a small group of educators to target a problem of practice and select an approach for working together. The good thing about this, it's not like, sometimes students tell us, why am I learning this? Like they're learning a certain math concept. They say, we're never going to use this, or these facts are just, just wasted time, just doing worksheets or something. This isn't. How do you lead even just 4 or 5 people? That's the key to our work. If you can lead a small group with integrity and with purpose and focus, and they feel respected and like a part of the process, if you're faithful with those few, you'll be able to rule many. And that's kind of like the story of leadership for anyone. And you've already had other areas of leadership in your life, personal life, friendships, all kind of different things where you've had to lead people, and whether it's in education or so forth. And you see how it started off small, same principles that you learned with the small group, or the same things that help you to work with bigger groups and you grow your capacity, right? So awesome. So they're trying to get a picture of that because they don't know you. So you're going to explain that through this cycle. Any questions before I continue? Because I feel like I'm talking too much. Is it okay? All right, awesome. All right, so identify the evidence-based strategy. We get scared. We say, oh, evidence-based. Oh man, I got to come up with some evidence-based stuff, right? So don't worry. That's the part where you ask questions. And right now, as you're inside of that cycle 1, talk to Dr. Udini and different ones. You say, okay, tell me about this evidence-based strategies. I need these strategies, these tools, right? And different things. So I can know how to approach that part. So that's where you ask them those questions. So you can articulate that part, right? All right. So that will strengthen or increase equitable learning, right? Or well-being for students. So that's where you want to get some type of data, right? Whether it's quantitative or qualitative, and be able to talk about what's your strategy for attacking a problem, what's something that's already worked. A lot of times, this isn't the time to get deep and come up with some new thing as if you're writing a dissertation. You're not trying to do that right now, but you want to, like, at a smaller scale, understand some of the practices of research to be able to at least come up with a strategy. Maybe it's something somebody's already used or worked before. You don't have to create your own. Does that make sense? All right. So how do you facilitate meetings with this group? So they're going to look at those basic skills, like how do you give them voice and choice and selection? How do you give equal, basically call it equity of voice, right? Giving people a chance to listen, that pause time. Are everybody able to contribute? What are some of the roles of the different team members? Who's keeping records? Who's, able to keep the time on, what I mean? Things like that. It may seem like basic, but that's a part of running groups. People, they got to get home to their kids. There's contract stuff you can go over too late, and like you got a grievance, so it may seem like simple stuff like ground rules before the meeting, like how are we going to keep this meeting focused, because it can get off task and people would just start arguing or debating and you never got to anything, right? So how do you facilitate that, right? Collaboratively lead the professional learning of community of practice. So just, how do you do it together? Reflect on how facilitation supports the group to address the problem. That facilitation piece, that's that artwork. So how do you get other people talking? Just similar. Are you guys both teachers?
Yeah. Oh, I am. I teach second grade currently.
And I'm a resource specialist, so I teach, but mostly small groups.
Oh, okay, awesome. So that's a good thing about our generation now. We're taught more to try to have that shared conversations and get people involved and be more like a facilitator and try to fill things out more, right? Instead of just sage on stage stuff, right? So, and more than any time, it seems like our leadership today, people want to feel like they have a voice or buy-in to have buy-in. You know, if we don't give them any voice, they can't say anything. It's like we're walking by ourselves, like we're not leading anyone.
Mhm.
You know, they want if they feel listened to, even if they're misunderstood or whatever, people just want to be listened to first of all. So that's so important. So from the grader's perspective, they know how dangerous it is that when you have a leader who doesn't listen to the people who they're supposed to serve, how that can like mess up schools, environments, and it can become toxic, right? So if you show that you're a reflective thinker and you're like a person that believes in shared leadership and you're a facilitator of knowledge and things like that, that looks good. It's like, hey, that's the type of leader that we want running our schools. They're not going to create more lawsuits and burn out, right? Make people quit the profession. All right, so problem of practice. Okay, she responded to feedback. Oh yeah, how do you respond to feedback? Now it's true, and you guys are still kind of new in the program, and you're going to learn more and more things. But of course, already from your experience in education, where sometime like have you ever been at meetings where things like you could tell like there's some type of conflict going on between like the leader or people, and like you could just kind of sense like some uneasiness. You ever been in those?
Yes.
You're like, it's almost like a reality show. You're like, I wonder how this is gonna play out. Now, there is some skill sets and things that you want to try to learn now before you're in that hot spot, and it's kind of easier to learn it now. So feedback and like how to respond to people even when they're crazy and how not to respond. Later when we get our classes going, you'll hear all kind of examples from me of different things. But I remember when I became a school principal, I was an AP for like 3 years, and I became a elementary principal. And man, this teacher, it's like she came into the meeting. It was like a site council meeting. And it was like, she was like after me, like she just came in there mad, like barking, like she just wanted to pick a fight, right? And I'm thinking, I could tell this lady wants to fight. And she's like somebody who's been there from like the beginning of the district. So her brother like built the schools also. So he's got that economic capital, political capital, all this stuff. So I'm thinking, man, I gotta be wise. This lady is like talking crazy to me in front of everyone. And I'm just like, okay, just stay normal. Don't respond to her. Don't even let her see your face. Like, look like she's crazy, right? But she did get to me a little bit, but I didn't go off or I didn't, but later one of the PTA, one of the parents, they were excited having me come in there and everything and wanted me to stay and everything. She just had a personal meeting with me and said, you know what, we're really excited to have you here. And we can see already you're doing great things. And she was kind of giving me a tip. She said, because she know that, the lady was after me. She said, the skills that brought you here, and that made you, where you're at today and that's successful are different from the skills that's going to keep you here. And a lot of times in leadership, it's so true. The same skill sets that you had as a teacher in other areas, there's some new skill sets that you're going to gain when you step into these new roles. And that's okay, because that success that you had there, if you keep growing and learning and trying to figure things out, that can help you to be successful, but it is going to be a new skill set. So taking feedback 100% from adults, like that's a new skill set. And there's no way to stay in administration without taking feedback from adults. Because sometimes we're like, when it was a kid, it's like, hey, I'm grown. I'm going to listen to you, but I choose to, right? You know what I mean? With adults, no, they're not going to let you not listen to them. You will be gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm sorry, I'm starting to get in the lecture stuff, but this is what this is about: leadership and communities of practice. All right, so moving forward. Carefully review and adhere to evidence table in the CalAPA Cycle 2 guide. So look at the guide, right? That I have that there for you on the link. So you want to carefully review all of that. Okay, there's no easy fix. Okay, there's no fast food on this stuff. You want to just look at those materials and carefully review it. Okay, the table, it outlines everything that you need, and you just need that quality time. Like I remember when you first go into college and you have some history teacher, someone, they tell you to like outline the chapter. It's like that type of stuff where you got to go through details and just like, but once you get it, you got it and you feel confident about it. Okay. So cycle 2 is more involved with logistically tedious, right? It's tedious, so don't take anything for granted, look at the evidence, whatever it's asking, make sure you add those to your writing. Whatever it's asking you specifically, add that there. So for example, step 1, investigate, right? So they give you a template that's provided there. So I put everything there pretty much in detail directly from the source there. So inquire about and describe the current professional learning context and investigate the role of the collaborative professional learning or communities of practice at your school. So say that's what they're asking you, right? And you're going to do a write-up. So in your write-up, you're going to talk specifically about that. Okay, it doesn't have to sound all rosy and peachy and super deep, but talk about the specific thing what is asking you. That's a part of those paragraphs. And then based on available student data, so then you use the data, identify an educational focus, right? This is what we're going to focus on for our collaborative practice, whatever that problem or issue is, right? That can positively impact student learning. So we're going to have different assignments that's going to help prepare you for this type of writing. How would this have an impact positively on your student learning at your campus in your context? You're going to give all this history of your school and you're going to have those different assignments, right? So based on the area of educational focus, select appropriate group of 3 to 5 educators. So it's just giving you the instructions there. When you select these 3 to 5 educators, honestly, you really want to finish this program and you want to have a good experience. Pick people that you feel like that can really contribute and they want to help you to complete your program. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Eventually you'll get to that place where you're going to have people that you won't want to work with, but you have to work with them and lead them. But I wouldn't say to do that right away for this project. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just be like, let me get you on my community of practice. I know you don't like me and you're going to take over the group and I'm not going to get anything done. You know what I mean? But it's you know what I mean?
That's a
Go ahead,
question.
Karen.
So, I haven't done this yet where I've the recording part yet, but one of my colleagues in the program did, and she's another resource specialist. And she recorded the meeting on Zoom, and one of our colleagues was like super rude in the meeting. And do you think, like, I guess she can edit it out and not have to show that part, huh? I was wondering if she should like redo it. Like, do you have to have the recordings from multiple meetings?
Yeah,
or
you can, you can choose which ones to use that can show your areas of leadership. Sometimes you may be able to use that. And if you were able to calm the person to show how you were able to come back to a consensus, there are going to be times where you may get into certain conversations, people have strong feelings or sentiments, and then somehow somebody else said something and you found a way to navigate and bring them together. Then that can be like an art piece that you can show with your leadership. You kept it real. And they're like, wow, that was good. Like, usually it may take 5 years of leading to do that, but you already did that. You know, so it depends, but you don't have to use that. A lot of these clips, we may record like 5 or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And, but really you only get like clips of like 1 minute or 2 minutes just to back up the area you're trying to show. So you'll be able to be selective in showing your annotations to back up the skill set that you're trying to display from the description.
Okay.
That makes sense? So yeah.
Great. Okay, that's helpful. And we do three clips, right? We send 3 clips. Is that right?
We're gonna get into all of that as time goes on, and I have I have all that written there for you to go back and check too. And then when we have our class in the summer, we're gonna go through all that in detail as a part of assignments. But really, when you finish that assignment later and you submit, we made it so close where a lot of that stuff, you can just take it from what you did with us, change a couple things around, and boom.
That's what we want.
That's pretty much. All right, I'm going to try to move a little faster for us. So a lot of this is kind of the same thing what I just said, but we kind of wrote it all there. So you have the template here. You know, it's just giving an overview. You're going to have time to soak all this up. You don't have to know it all right now, right? But this is the stuff that's written in your rubric for, you know, what's your first step, your second step. And so you don't have to get overwhelmed right now, but all that is there for you. So when you talk about it, you're going to keep hearing things like implement evidence-based strategy with a group for several weeks. So whatever you guys decide once you come up with your problem and how you guys are going to go about doing that, you're going to hold your meetings and, you know, you're going to record and all these things, and you're going to start getting comfortable with this. as you take it piece by piece. Right away, if I read all this to you and tell you, you're going to get overwhelmed. Okay. But I want you to look at this as a reference and know that you're going to have these meetings. Yes. And you're going to implement, you're going to have discussions. You're going to show how you guys collaboratively look at these things. And you're going to write and you're going to reflect a lot about your interaction between the team members as you guys are talking about these topics and when you show the data, right? And you're gaining confidence by working with your peers leading, and they want to know, what does that feel like? When did you know when to put on the brakes and when to slow down or when to move forward? So you're going to express that and communicate. You're going to feel like you're saying the same thing over and over in some of these questions and things. And that's okay, because when the graders read this, they're not going to read this all in like one type orderly way. It's going to be like in different questions, and they're just going to read parts of it at a time. So you may be doing it where you feel like you're doing it all together, but they're going to be reading this at different points. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So even if you feel redundant, don't worry. Just okay. Let me see. So at some point, you guys are going to do the 3 annotated video clips. What I did here is I show you guys kind of like some examples, but don't do that. Like whatever you guys do in the future, when you do your videos and you record your meetings, don't post it online. Can't do that. There were some people who posted some of theirs online. So it was just there. So I used it as some references for you to see what that looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's already out there, but don't do that. So I even put on there, don't do that. So when you do get to this part, don't be overwhelmed. We're going to teach you and show you. It's going to be pretty simple to do. And when you do your annotations, like you were mentioning earlier, so say, for example, you have a part of the meeting where you talk about your shared norms. For in our meeting, this is what we're going to make sure that we do to make sure we stay on target. All right. We're going to focus on the main agenda item. We're going to listen to everyone's voice. We're going to give others a chance, whatever your norms are. So you going over those norms, say you went over that for 40 seconds and you discussed it with them, and some people asked a couple questions about it and you clarified and you guys established those together, and it was a total of like 1 minute and 30 seconds. So one of your annotations would just be that 1 minute and 40 seconds or whatever, showing how you went over those norms. Boom. Okay. And then you would annotate describing how you went over the norms and what that looked like, what was the conversation like, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Or if it was building a consensus.
And that's where it's beneficial for us to reference all of those standards, right? In those annotations,
Yes.
like did this here, evidenced by this.
So in the annotation you won't, but when you reflect and they have you do the narrative about it, then you would reference your standards. Plus later, some of the books research that you get from the books that you read in class and things that are going to back up a lot of these things. Also, you'll add that into the puzzle.
Got it.
Okay. But on the actual annotation, you'll just describe what you're talking about in the video. Because sometimes the video may not be as clear or people can't hear the voice good. You would give kind of like a summary of what's going on right there. But then when you do your reflection part, when you have to describe how it was building a consensus, and then plus you talk about the research about shared vision, and that's where you bring in the standard. And then you talk about one of the writers, Manzano or somebody said this, and you add all that puzzle, and they're like, oh, they're smart. They're bringing in research. They're bringing in the standards. They're bringing in personal experience. You get it? They can see your leadership. And that's what we want as leaders, right? We want people to have enough theory and to understand like the big picture, but at the same time, we want them to show practice, right? All right. So you start getting to the reflect part, right? And you start having your written narrative. And sometimes people can get off topic and just start writing. You can't do that. Like focus on what you're supposed to focus on. Put those elements in there and stick to that. It's not like the time for a thesis, but you want to stay within a framework of what they're asking and just adding those standards, adding research, adding your experience, and describing your leadership and what that felt like. But whatever they're asking you, don't just start talking. Sometimes people do that. But it's one thing if you do that and you answer the question, but sometimes people will answer, like if it's asking you to talk about 5 different aspects, they'll talk about 2 things and they'll go on for that for so long that they never mentioned the other 3 elements. So then you don't get the basic score. they're still looking at it like a rubric. If it asks you for 5 particular things, talk about those 5 particular things. And then if you want to add something, you just add research to support those things or standards. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So once again, you want to carefully review rubrics, okay, which are used to score your work between a 3 and a 5. And of course, everybody may have their own opinions about rubrics and everything, but for this, it's a rubric system. So you just flow with it, okay? All right. Notice trigger words and use them in your writing, in your annotations, okay? Different acronyms and different words, you want to use those words, okay? And pay attention to what is required, okay, to be submitted as evidence. So everything that it says that is asking, if it's asking you for the minutes, like you're going to take minutes, have the minutes for your meeting. If it's asking you for the role or whatever it may be, video limits, if it says 2 minutes, your video can't be over 2 minutes, then you can't be over 2 minutes and can't be under a minute, or whatever it may be at that time for that session. Make sure you stay within that. If you put 30 minutes and they say, you know what, we only do the first 20, and your most important thing that you talked about was after 30 minutes, it's not going to count. Okay. So this is the part that I like. So, only because I want to know what's expected, right? So you have your essential question. So how does the candidate describe and analyze the role? Because they're looking at your skill set of current practice as a professional, collaboration at the school, at the current practice relate to student learning or well-being. So say this is what they're looking at when you describe or answer a question. So you want to go to that 3 level and start there. Like they're looking at, okay, does the candidate in their writing analyze the role of the current professional collaboration practice at the school? Like what's going on in that context? At that school site, have people been working together? Has the principal, or do they have PLCs that work together? Do they collaborate within departments or cross-curricular department meetings? What does that look like in the district? How do they collaborate as a district? How these practices relate to student learning, and they go into particulars, right? So say you describe those particular things, what it talked about, what it asked you, and then to take it to the next level, you just add more, providing evidence of your observations, using documentation, so forth. And that just takes it to the next level. And then right here where it says CAPE standards, it's showing you which standards that you want to be looking for to talk about for that particular question. So sometimes, you write something, you're like, okay, what should I be talking about? So go to that standard and then say, oh, they're trying to look at that. Okay, so let me look at our practice and see how did we describe that, or how did we work on that? And that'll help you. So you go through these rubrics on every level, whether it's step 1 in the investigation part of what you're doing. And you want to always start at that level 3 and make sure you're fulfilling that. And then you can add more with 4 or 5. And over time, you're going to get more practice understanding what this is all about. Once again, just like when you first start something, you haven't got a chance to read the manual and everything. You get some time, you start looking over it, you'll feel more comfortable. You don't have to know all this yet. Just seeing an overview. A lot of times things are easier than what it looks like. It's just when it's thrown at you all at once, it's overwhelming, right? So you'll have time to figure this out. Questions?
I was going to say, this is not necessarily off topic, but what is the pass rate of these CalAPAs? I think we're all curious about that.
Yeah. So usually, like say and Dr. O will tell you probably more about that too, but mostly say like within a cohort of say if we have 50 or 60, maybe like in the beginning, like of course, like almost everyone, like we don't have nobody that fails or whatever, right? Or have to retake, I guess you would say. I guess within the last year, we've had some that didn't. So maybe like out of, say out of 50, maybe like 5 or 6 people may have to redo it. Dr. O will know the numbers a little better. Yeah. But even if you have to resubmit or something like that, maybe it was just a technical error. Maybe like your video didn't upload right, or, you know what I mean? There's one section that, you didn't meet the minimum qualifications or whatever it may be. You'll get another chance to resubmit that.
And they give you that feedback when you get it returned? Do you know which section like didn't pass or not necessarily?
Yeah, you'll probably know which section that didn't
Okay.
pass. Dr. O, ask her more about
Yeah.
that part.
Yeah.
But the main part would be like, yeah, it would let you know which area you would have to redo and resubmit.
Okay.
And then yeah, you should be able to know. And the good
Not
thing
that
is
I'm
that it's a
planning for that.
portfolio.
Not that I'm planning to fail it.
Yes, I know what you mean. But in general, though, it's pretty much like an open book test. It's more of a like back in the days, like say when we got our admin credential, right? For me, it was like 2009 is when I got mine, right? And it was a portfolio that we turned in. We did the same thing like you guys are doing, and you'll have these different standards, and you have to show the evidence of what you did to meet that standard. And it was just a portfolio that we turned in, right? And they just examine that portfolio and look at the evidence, and they can see that we did what we were supposed to do. So now what they make you do is to do the same thing, but now you're submitting this electronically and you're doing your write-ups and everything, but it's just all kind of pretty much electronically, it seems. But you still just have to show that you have evidence in all these different areas. And it seems like they're just judging your writing and things a little more technical with the rubrics and everything. Where at first it seems like it was just set up more like, as long as you have the evidence and things, it didn't seem like it was as critical, where they didn't check your writings as detailed as they do when it comes to CalAPA now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. I know. Wish you guys could have 10, 12 years ago, right?
I know.
Well,
It's
it's not
like
even that long. It's been about 5
making it
years.
harder to get principals, but we need principals.
Exactly. But once you finish all this stuff, then it's pretty much done. Like
Yeah.
now, like every year, now it's been like 12 years for me as administrator. And like every 5 years, you just like pay like, your $90 or something, and it just renews, So those days will come. All right. So this is same. I just put more on there. You'll get into all these specifics. It's better for you to just take it as you go step by step when you go through the class and everything. But the main goal is you want to always start in the middle. Make sure you're the basics that they talk about in the middle that answers the question. You want to make sure you do that. And then from there, mostly it's the formula of adding the standards, adding research, and then that gives you more for your and see how it asks for your sources of evidence. You make sure you put those sources of evidence, your minutes, your agendas and so forth. So what happens is sometimes people will go off in a certain area and they forget, it's the evidence or something like that, and that'll automatically like disqualify you. So as long as you stay within the rubric and everything that is asking for, then you're okay. And it's good that you have this ahead of time, so you know exactly what's expected. This just goes into more of the details on the different parts about investigate, plan, and act. And it just shows you like when you get ready to submit everything, the type of documents that you can submit, PDF, doc, so forth, the timing, some of the specifics that's inside of your book there, but it's just kind of shows you like a general outline, just a different format with it. So here's some things that I wanted to just talk to you about, just to give you some extra. So as an equity driven leader, when you're writing this stuff, they want to see that like you're looking at like voice of participants, and that you're going to be a leader that's trying to lead with equity, where all your stakeholders, from their backgrounds, culturally, socially, when it comes to gender, when you're writing, those are like warning signs. If somebody's like, hey, you know what? I just think like all people are good, but except for this kind of people. Like, hold up. Wait a minute. Let's don't give this person a credential. You know what I mean? So you should sound like you care about equity. You care about issues of culture and competence. And, you're trying to lead in a just way, in a fair way. And so those type of issues and concerns. So you're going to have a lot of classes, right? Like multicultural education and, school law, and you want to sound articulate in those areas and be able to express that you're a leader that has integrity, and you're a leader that's just, and you're a leader that's fair, and all these type of things. They want to see that. So if at some point you say something that's really off, like that's going to be like a warning sign, like, hold up, Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. As I reflect on the evidence-based practices in adult learning. So of course, anytime you get an opportunity to state research or use any type of evidence from research and things like that, showing that you're that educational leader by using research and seeing the bigger picture in theory and so forth, that's going to be good as well as you're writing. They want to see your reflection, your opportunity to reflect on your leadership. So that self-awareness part. In reality, sometimes people make it seem like as leaders, the elementary aspect of leading is like your reflection. But in reality, no, that's the deepest area of leadership, is when you can really like self-reflect and say, all right, let me think, why do I think this way? Why do I lead this way? You can understand yourself and kind of get some feedback, and that then you're constantly going to be able to grow. So they want to be able to see that. They're not looking for a person that's perfect, who don't have questions. They want to be able to see that you're reflective. And I think that it's like that naturally, right? For all of us, like people, they see us and they say, you know what? Well, I don't totally know right now, but I will get back to you. Let me look into that. And, but you got to really follow up and look into it and respond back. But it's okay sometimes to have to reflect and say, you know what? I'm going to try to find out the answer. Let me think more about that. So they're not expecting you to know everything right now, but to be reflective and to say, well, okay, what can I do to improve? What can I do to help? What kind of resources can I give to my team to help them to improve? Or what are some things that I learned through the process? All right. Part of a joint effort of examining student data, as these data relate to students' learning and well-being at the school, we determined that blah, 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 blah. Okay. Looking at different factors, showing those are kind of like census starters, right? What it should sound like. All right. So here you click on this and you just directly go to the website, and it'll show you different things like about confidentiality and security of your information when it comes to what you're working on with your community of practice. There's a lot of different rules on when you record people and when you have these meetings and things like that. So you want to be following that. Submission requirements and codes. You want to make sure that you're doing those things right. So over time, you read all those different qualifications. Confidentiality. I have things within a video where it'll show like how you go about annotating and respecting the people's privacy. I have some of that inside this presentation as well. So I just put these there as resources for you. Preparation materials, everything, places where you can go to get this information that you're going to need. So I put that in there. These are some of my concluding tips. You can read over that. I kind of mentioned some of this already to you. Some of this we're going to talk about a lot of this we're going to talk about when you have your class this summer. I'm going to talk about this more with you with your assignments. We'll go into more detail. And I just listed some of the more things about the capes and everything here. Try to be systematic as possible in your writing. So, like the writers or the readers, they don't want to try to like look too long to try to find out what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Kind of like if you're grading too, you're like, hey, tell me, they don't have time to find like the poetic aspect. They're like, hey, did you answer the question? Like, talk to me, like, so it's okay if you feel like it sounds really structured, and kind of like robot, not total robot, but it's like, they're looking for the goods,
Clear and concise.
Yes, very concise. There we go. So I just have extra resources here for you to look at in your leisure. As time goes on, a lot of times people were afraid about video annotations and everything. It's actually not as bad as it seems, and you're going to get a lot of practice. So I just thought I would just put that out there for you. So I have like organizers that I create just to like, where you can see things in a different way when it comes to organizing some of these things. So I'm like a check the list person. So like I thought, okay, well, did I do my minutes? How did I do this? Or there's just different things that you can use, different type of methods to help yourself. Some people, that may not work for them. They like something else. But I just kind of created different things for you. And this gives more of a visual of some of these things, like, for example, when you're selecting your community of practice, this one of the future administrators, right? She's probably an administrator now, but she talked about what that process looked like for her. So sometime when you can see these examples from others, it helps you to feel more comfortable. And then on your first meeting, what might that look like? You know, and what are you looking for? So these are statements that's directly from, you know, what you're going to be writing about. So I show that. So I say right here too, don't do this. So, okay. Same thing for, you're going to be doing an annotation where you do like a closing. What does closing the meeting look like? How did you facilitate that and everything? What did that look like? And you saw their example there, kind of give you a sample, you know. So same thing for this one, just giving you another sample of things. Okay. And then you're going to have, you know, other meetings and so forth. So then I give you a whole lesson. We'll talk more about that in our class on general notes for, you know, for when you do your annotations. And this is all, I took this information from the guidebook for cycle 2. And I just basically took it directly from there and put it into the PowerPoint. So it's no dual messages. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
I know at the orientation, you made a comment about sort of being strategic about what assignments might overlap in classes and so on.
Mhm.
And so we're having a very similar assignment right now from Dr. Pitts.
Uh-huh.
And so do they work in tandem, or should I like wait a little? Like Nathan, have you done your video yet?
I haven't done anything. I said I was going to submit the agenda, but it's due on the 10th, I think, right? I don't know.
But this is super helpful. Like, I'm
Yeah.
really glad I'm
Yeah.
seeing we're
Yeah,
doing
they're
it.
going to work together. So what you're doing in her class, that's going to be a lot of the same stuff. You're going to just transfer that over here. She's prepping you and starting you for the assignments that you're going to be doing in our class.
Got it.
Okay, because this is super helpful, and like it's
Yes.
thinking about like the video. And so I was just wondering, yeah, it's making me
Yeah.
feel like okay that I'm not done with it yet.
Yeah, no. That's what you're going to be, the same video for your community of practice, your first meeting and things like that. You're going to be using that for your project, for your assignment in my class.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yep. Signature assignment. Yep. All right. Yep. So that's really good. The people, your community of practice, you're going to have them, they're going to have a form for you to sign about their confidentiality. Because what happens is you're going to have this group that you're leading, and the topics that they're going to talk about, to make them feel comfortable, they're going to have to feel like, hey, this isn't something that other people, my administration or district, is going to know about. Because you're going to talk about stuff people, they want a voice. They want to be able to, like, you know, talk to other adults about like issues and like really feel like they can make some changes. But sometimes if your paycheck's tied to it, or like they're afraid to talk because of people that are in the room, right? So that's the good thing about the confidentiality piece, where they can be real and it's not tied to their paycheck. And it would be illegal if you shared that information to their principal or someone about what they talked about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons what helped me when it comes to becoming a professor. Because like when you're an administrator, you can talk to your spouse or significant other, you know, but a lot of times there's so much stuff we can't even talk to other people about this stuff. You know what I mean? But if you go and teach and give back, you get a chance to talk a little bit, you know, and talk to other adults and let it out. So that's a good buying point, but you don't tell them that. But that's why some people will join your community of practice, because they may not sometimes feel like in their district or in their school site they're making a difference. But if you can get with 3 or 4 or 5 people who feel like, man, I care, you know what I mean? There's some issues that are dear to my heart that I wish we can just kind of talk about, and somebody was trying to do something about, you know? So, all right. A lot of these details, you guys are going to get into this later. Okay. So I just put it there as a reference for you for right now. Right here, I kind of talked about earlier how, say with the video clip, when it comes to annotating, he's just describing what he was talking about at which part in the video. So that's not where he listed the standards yet. Later, when you do the reflection write-up piece, then you would talk about the standard and put in some research stuff. Does that make sense? Yep. So, yeah, so this is the Zoom thing. So I need to find out about getting the passcode on there. So this is just a brief introduction. And you guys are going to have so much more that we're going to be going into detail about. But I think you got a little taste, a little sample. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Thank you. This is super helpful. It was nice
Glad
to
to
have
hear that.
sort of like explicitly kind of